Elijah Cummings was the child of two former sharecroppers. He eventually went to Howard University, where he served as student government president, then on to law school. He worked his way up through state politics, serving in the Maryland House of Delegates and ultimately the halls of Congress. Cummings was a public servant for most of his life, with a remarkable record to show for it. To talk more about Cummings' life and legacy, I'm joined by two people who are close to him: Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Democrat from California, who served alongside Cummings for more than 20 years in the House, and Sherilyn Ifill, President Director Counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who worked in Baltimore on local and national issues with Congressman Cummings for over 30 years. Congresswoman, maybe I'll start with you. And first, obviously, my deepest condolences for his loss.
Yes.
What was he like as a colleague?
Well, first, Chris, let me just offer my condolences to his wife, Maya, and his family and the entire community and, of course, Baltimore, because our heart is heavy tonight. This has been a very sad, difficult day. Elijah Cummings was a great, great statesman. He was a fighter. He did not pull any punches, but he was a kind and gentle human being. He encouraged me when I first came to Congress. He inspired me. He knew that I had come in a special election and had big shoes to fill. I actually followed my predecessor, who I had worked for, Congressman Ron Dellums, who was a statesman, a warrior, and a close friend of Elijah's. Well, Elijah told me, hey, now you've got to step up, carve your own agenda, and get out there. He actually offered to help, and so he came to my district. Now, this is Elijah in terms of how he inspired others and how he supported us all. Came to my district early on, I believe it was 98 or 99, held a town meeting on gun safety, on mass incarceration, and on criminal justice reform. And it was an amazing moment, and he lifted me up in ways that no one else had. He was the first member of Congress to come to my district to help me. And he constantly supported me over and over and over again. And everything that every campaign I mounted, every effort that I was engaged in.
Sherilyn, I know you worked with the congressman. You're also connected to Baltimore, a city that he deeply, deeply loved and lived in his whole life, more or less. What was his relationship like to that city?
I think of Elijah Cummings as the quintessential Baltimorean. He really passionately loved the city and really walked this city with a sense of pride and dignity. He felt tremendous compassion for people who were living at the margins. But most of all, he felt respect for the city, and he demanded respect for the city. He was proud to represent the city. And one of the things I loved so much about him was the way he listened to his constituents. I first met him when I was teaching at University of Maryland Law School, which was the law school he had graduated from several decades before. And I had clients whose children were lead poisoned, and I remember we invited him at that time. He was in the legislature, the General Assembly, excuse me, to a community meeting and with some of the mothers of lead poisoned children. And what I remember so much was sitting in this room, this very small room, with Cummings, and the way he listened to those moms. And that was throughout all of the years that I knew him. This engagement. We all talk about his eloquence and his speaking, but he listened to people. He liked to listen to people, and he did it around policing reform. More recently, we co-hosted a forum, a town hall together, emotions running high, passion, screaming, anger, understandable anger. And I think you just showed that picture of him just listening to people's pain. It was just a rare way that he chose to present his leadership in the city. He was strong. He was nobody's fool, and he was nobody's wimp. He was uncompromising. He believed in justice, but he always let you see his heart. And he always let you know that he saw yours. That's a rare ability in an elected leader, and it was just quite extraordinary.
Yeah, Congresswoman, what Sherilyn just said and what you said before about how his colleagues felt about him, it's been striking to me to listen to Republicans talk about him today, because Congressman Cummings had a very strong vision. He fought very hard for the things he believed in. He was a very strong voice for those. He was not a mealy-mouthed, kind of play it both ways kind of individual in his politics, but he also really did have deep bonds of affection and mutual respect with other folks in the Congress who did not share his ideological vision.
Absolutely. Elijah Cummings crossed the aisle many times on many issues and had many friends, Democrats and Republicans. And even though he disagreed with many of their policies, he was respectful, and he respected their dignity, and he respected their perspective. And I had an experience with Elijah once when I was struggling with my vote against the authorization to use force after the horrific events of 9/11. And I was in the cloakroom to show you how Elijah really respected different points of views. I would talk to Elijah, and he was the last member of Congress I talked to about how I would vote, understanding that I was struggling with giving any president a blank check to go to war. And Elijah told me, and he, you know, both of his parents were pastors, and he was a man of deep faith. And he told me, he said, Barbara, look, you've got to follow your conscience, and you've got to follow what you believe the Constitution says with regard to casting that vote. He said, so whatever you do, I'm going to respect what you do. And it was at that moment, Chris, that I decided to go to the memorial service. And he was the last person who gave me that advice, and I'll always respect and love him and thank him for that.
Quickly, Sherilyn, his legacy on democracy, voting rights, and the census seems to me incredibly important.
At this moment in this country, it couldn't be more important, and that's why I think so many of us are putting out his speeches and his words and the leadership that he demonstrated on the House Oversight Committee. I feel it is a sacred pledge that for this man, but also for this country, because he saw something in this country that maybe we often don't see, or maybe we believe doesn't exist anymore. And I think it's incumbent upon us to really lift that up. And that means fighting for voting rights. That means fighting for our democracy, fighting for the truth in his name. And if you loved this man, if you admired this man, then fight. Don't just, you know, shed tears, fight.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Sherilyn Ifill, thank you so much